I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, panels, what the society are facing is a disconnection and also misunderstanding of what one another feels. So, let's do some setup, which is the first one being panels. We believe that the burden of proof in this debate is to prove that we are fixing the issues without severely harming the actor. So, where this debate happens, panels, we live in a world where disconnection of feeling exists massively. Kids doesn't understand their parents and vice versa. A husband that didn't know what does his wife feels and vice versa. A government who or those in a higher position don't know what does it means to be discriminated, to be mistreated. Therefore, our world face violence, discrimination, and many other massive issues. Why is this urgent? One must realize that humanity is stuck in the cycle of violence, and they barely has any way to solve it. So although we already have mouth and expression to express ourselves, of to express our emotion, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't sufficient. A misunderstanding of emotion still exists, and it was massive. A husband didn't understand how to please his wife when she seemed displeased, because he didn't understand what she felt, or when a boss mistreat his worker and he seemed displeased, he still haven't know what is actually happening holistically. So words could only take you so far, even when everyone have it. So the ability to express themselves properly hasn't happened. Violence and human exploitation still happen. Discrimination and segregation of races and also of classes exist massively, and it took decades for it to settle down before it started again. So not only that, after actor who lacks the capabilities to express themselves exist massively. They were bound by boundary of fear, lack of ability, trauma, and also many other aspects. So the cycle of violence were caused by a misunderstanding. So you need to fix the core problem of the status quo, which is the misunderstanding and also the lack of ability to express and communicate. And that is why we are making communication better and accessible for all of the actors. So panels who have the ability, even if we have the ability to expressing ourselves means nothing when no one catch what do you actually mean actually. So the mechanism we are proposing is we could transfer our emotion without having to have the consent from the receiver. Therefore, we could just transfer our emotion to them. Therefore, now people could know and understand each other emotion without having any boundaries and without having to fear that they don't understand, and they don't really understand the holistical, the bigger picture. We could emphasize better. We could send our emotion holistically. Therefore, we are solving the misunderstanding and also the lack of ability to express ourselves that is massively happening under the proposition side. So but then let's talk about my argument, with the first one being expressing ourselves isn't enough, and secondly, not everyone and everything could express and communicate but sufficiently. So firstly, the expressing ourselves wasn't enough. Panels realized that stigma, misunderstanding, and mistreating happens massively when we fail to empathize. So why can't we? With what a human was able to express is only a little. Word can only take you so far, and expression could only take you. Not everyone could mean what you're expressing. Could understand what you're expressing. Not only that, mostly there's boundary why we couldn't express ourselves in the first place. Those boundary is fear of being misunderstood, therefore worsening the situation. So words and facial expression could only take us so far, as how I've explained before. Why is it then? Why is it then outside solve this? So we could send our emotion forcefully and holistically. Therefore, we could we were transferring our emotion without boundary and fear. So understanding and empathy could also be achieved to those who cannot communicate freely, like slaves or introvert or a minority, and many more vulnerable actor that is really in urgent need of communication and a proper ways of communicating. So why is it this urgent? Panels, as how I've explained before, the problem in the status quo is massive and it's cycling as if it won't end. Even if it end, it will just start in another decades or in another century. So history will repeat itself, and our history that was written already told us all of this. Conflicts and violence happens every time. It was because people could not understand, people could not empathize, and people could not understand what other feels. We need people to empathize and to understand to solve all of that problem that is happening within the status quo, and it hasn't been solved properly. We need to save the vulnerable actor too, which is entering to which is aligned with my second argument, being panels introvert exists, slave also exists in some places, victim of violence that also victim violence that traumatized them also exist. They were bound by trauma, they were bound by fear, they were bound by the inability to express themselves. The lack of ability is really really massive, and it will be really bad for them regarding they could not achieve any understanding or even achieve any proper communication in the first place. So those actor was lacking the ability to communicate, to express themselves, either by lacking the ability or having massive boundary that prevents them from. So how do we help them with we are so why when we could express their emotion holistically with using transferable emotion, proper communication could be exist and achieved, and it doesn't require them to be having fear of and misunderstanding or fear of being mistreated or a fear of being enabled to express themselves. So it doesn't require them to have the ability to communicate, but it doesn't mean communicating doesn't happen. We believe that our mechanism is still limited, so so therefore with this we're bringing a way for people to then communicate. So rather than making communication doesn't exist, we are making a bridge towards communication. So communication is still important and still achievable under our side, but it doesn't actually achievable under a proposition side because of all of the issues that I've said before. And even if those issues and those issues cannot ever be fully solved without actually having people to be able to have the proper ability and sufficient ability to express themselves, even of those who is who is vulnerable actor. So why is this urgent? Those vulnerable actor live in distrust, fear, and also oppression, and they live in those things forever. They could not express themselves, they could not solve their own problem when they could not even get people's attention or people's empathy. Without the bridge, those actors live in distress for their whole life. That is why we are that is why we're also significant in this part. So that is all my case. Thank you.